I lived almost my entire life in Europe before I eventually left, and I don't think I ever want to live anywhere in Western or Northern Europe again in my life. And in this video I want to tell you why. So I'm someone who's obsessed with growth. I want to build my life, build my business, generally move forward in life. And the longer I spent in Europe, specifically I lived in Finland and in the UK, the more I felt that that region of the world nowadays is sort of the opposite of who I am. Europe to me is sort of a region that looks to the past, when I as a person am always the kind of person that looks to the future. I want to be in places that want to move forward, but especially in the past few years I think Europe has just declined further and further and further, and I don't think it's gonna get any better for them anytime soon. And this video might be controversial, of course. It's probably gonna hurt some people's feelings, but I'm just sharing my experience and why Europe was not right for me. If it's right for you, great. And of course, Europe is a big continent. I'm specifically mainly talking about sort of European Union, Western Europe, Northern Europe, and perhaps excluding Switzerland. But let's talk about Europe. So the obvious one is, of course, the crazy taxes. And this is another thing where people from the US will complain like, oh, we have to pay 37% maximum tax. Like, look, calm down. In Europe, we pay literally like 55%. I think in Finland, the top rate can go up to like 60+%, like depending on which place you live. Now, there are tax exemptions in certain countries, like Italy. They have like a lump sum taxation scheme if you're really wealthy. Portugal has had one, although I think a lot of these countries are now removing them. UK are removing their non-dom regime that they used to have. And while taxes are the obvious thing, I actually think they're more of a symptom of a larger attitude that is causing these high taxes, but we'll talk about that in a second. And I know that some people will say, traditionally that, but oh, in Europe you at least get something for your money. You get high quality of life, you get healthcare, you get all these kind of things, and perhaps that's true to some extent. But also I know from first-hand experience that in the past few years especially, it's been getting worse and worse and worse and worse. The pensions are basically bankrupt in a lot of Western European countries. They're having to raise the retirement ages more and more. And even if it were the case that these services were good, I don't care how good they are. No country to me is worth giving up 50%. Like, imagine working for half the year just to pay the government and being happy about it. That just shows the level of indoctrination that people in these countries are under. Now, of course, if you're just the average person making 40 grand a year, it doesn't really affect you that much because you're not really paying the taxes. But specifically, I'm talking to, again, people who are either doing well financially or who aspire to do well financially. Again, growth-minded people who are gonna get to the ranges where they are really paying these taxes. I just don't think it could possibly be worth it to pay these taxes, no matter what you get in return. What sort of tends to happen is that if you give any entity in general the ultimate power to just tax the entire incomes of a country, over time, that entity is going to end up taking up more and more and more power. Like, slowly people get used to one level of taxation, they're sort of grumpy about it, but then they get used to it, and a little by little they just increase them. It's funny, for example, in the US, income taxes used to be unconstitutional. They used to be completely illegal until I think it was the First World War, or it might have been the Civil War. But anyway, it was like a special situation where they said like, okay, we're gonna raise an income tax temporarily just to fund this war, but then after that it's gonna go away. But then obviously after that they just came up with some excuse to like keep it going and things like this. I don't know the exact history of how this has happened in Europe, but it's the sort of situation that if you just convince people to think like, oh yeah, it's okay to pay 45%, like eventually people are just gonna believe, because most people just believe whatever they're told. But anyway, I digress, because taxes are not the only reason. Because of course you can just have a business, keep money in the business, and you're not really paying the 40-50%. So if Europe really was amazing in other areas, maybe I'd be like okay with finding like some tax optimization strategies and things like this. But really it goes deeper than that to me. To me, Europe, like the European culture, for better or for worse, has a sort of attitude of like, you're just sort of supposed to be happy where you are. In Europe, it's more like,
oh, so you're trying to become an entrepreneur? Oh, but isn't that a bit risky? Like, oh, but whatever. What if this happens? What if that happens?
This sort of culture of risk aversion and just maintaining things as they are, rather than risking something to move forward, to build something new, is sort of very persistent in the European culture. And this is always like, I never really fit in. And of course, again, it depends if you're in the right circles. It's not everyone, of course, it's possible. To me, it's probably just these attitudes that have caused the high taxation, because really the laws in democratic countries like Western Europe are really just a representation of the general opinion of the public at any given point of time. But in the long term, of course, it just causes, especially now that the online economy and everything has grown, the top earners are just going to leave because they're not going to be happy paying these taxes. And when you combine this with like mass immigration, which is the other reason, people from poorer countries immigrating to Europe, sort of going to the bottom, not really contributing to the taxes of the society, and then people from the top who actually pay all the taxes now essentially being pushed out because of the taxes and because of the general attitude against high earners. Like, it's not hard to see why in the long run this is not really going to work out. And this is a big reason why the governments are basically bankrupt. Like, they're not doing very well financially at the moment. And I don't see how they're gonna get out of the cycle, because in the short run, they're going to have to increase taxes even further, because in the short run, yes, that is going to increase revenues. But in the long run, like all of these people again up here, they're gonna start thinking, oh, maybe I'm gonna go to Dubai, 0% tax, like all this kind of thing. They're gonna start leaving, and over time again, the government revenues are actually gonna start going down, which means they're gonna have to raise taxes again. More people are gonna leave, etc., etc., etc. It's a very tough thing to get out of, specifically because in order to get out of the situation and this cycle, it would require the average person to realize that this cycle of more and more taxation is not actually conducive to the overall prosperity of the country. And I'm not really confident that that is going to happen. And another place where you see this kind of sort of just safety and risk averse attitude is on the regulation. Like, I ran a tech startup last year briefly, and when I started looking into the differences of founding the startup in the EU versus doing it in the US, like, it was very evident that like Europe just seems hell-bent on making it as difficult as possible to run a business in the country. All this red tape that you need to go through to like set up a company, to running all these regulations, VAT. Now again, of course, it can be done, because someone's going to comment,
oh, but this one company did.
Of course, it's possible. But again, I'm just saying, if you're trying to grow a business that's already as difficult as it is, do you really want to make it even more difficult for you by running it inside of a regulatory regime that makes it even more difficult for you? Now look, and people will say,
oh, but at least in Europe you get high quality of life. Look at all these rankings that rank Vienna as the top high quality of life place in the world. Like,
the thing about all of the quality of life rankings and things like this, the issue I have with them is they're all very Western and specifically European centric. So quality of life is an extremely subjective thing. Like, I could come up with like some arbitrary criteria to make it seem like Iran is the highest quality of life place in the world. People like different things. People who make these rankings that are from the West, that are very pro-West. Usually these are like people from Financial Times and these kind of newspapers who are on like the left side of the political spectrum, that want to make it seem like these more socialist policies of Europe are like the haven of what every country should aspire to. Now maybe that's a conspiracy theory, but that is what I think is going on. Because if you really like look at it, like, to me, my quality of life in Dubai is so much higher than it was in London. People around me are more positive, which makes me feel more positive. The weather is much better. It's sunny every day, which is literally scientifically proven to increase your testosterone, increase how good you feel. It's more clean. So you see, quality of life and happiness, which again, that's a whole another tangent I could go on. Like, happiness is subjective. What is happiness to one person is different to another person. All of that is extremely, extremely subjective. So I wouldn't just look at rankings and be like,
oh, but this ranking says that Vienna is the highest quality of life city in the world. Clearly, you're wrong.
What I would do is make a list for yourself of the things that give you quality of life, and then look at the entire world and see like, okay, what is the place that actually has these attributes? When I did this exercise, I found that places like London were like at the bottom of the list. And anecdotally, I don't feel like people in Europe are too happy right now, at least from the people I'm speaking to. But of course, everything depends on you, what you like. There's a lot of places there where I could see myself going, like south of Spain, like perhaps after I've already made it, essentially, to like chill out, live the beach lifestyle. It's just not the stage of life that I'm in right now. It's not the type of person I am right now. So that is essentially why it is not right for me. And given that the environment is not right for me, I just don't see why it would be worth to pay the taxes, the absolute craziness that you would have to pay over there. So anyway, just some food for thought. Let me know what you think. I myself moved to Dubai. This is where most of my most ambitious friends and people that I know are moving to. Why? Well, largely it's because Dubai has sort of done the complete opposite of Europe in the sense. It's looked at how can we attract the highest, most growth-minded people here? How can we attract people who want to better themselves, build businesses, and in turn build a country? So they've made it very easy to move here. The process is extremely quick if you do everything properly. You get 0% tax as long as you make around less than $800,000 a year. If you make above that, it's 9% tax. Everything is safe. Perfect weather for like 8 months of the year. For summer months, yes, it's a bit too hot, so that's the only con. Other places are lots of countries in Asia offer very reasonable taxes. Singapore is perhaps the most developed one. There's Malaysia, there's Thailand, there's Bali. You've got places in Eastern Europe that a lot of people are moving to. Other places in the Gulf region. I would encourage you to just open your eyes, look at the world, see what you like, and don't just think you have to stay where you're born just because that's what you were told. If Dubai is specifically what interests you, if that is where you want to move, I actually made a free full guide here on YouTube on the process of getting your visa, setting up your company, and everything you really need to know about setting up here personally as well as business-wise. And you can watch that video right there. People have called it the best video on the internet on this topic. So if you're interested in that, make sure to watch this video to understand exactly what you need to do. With that, I will see you in the next one.